Hello, family. Welcome to this day before Thanksgiving Wednesday Wisdom, our Thanksgiving edition. And I just want to take a minute today to thank you and to give God thanks for you for being part of our online church. For those of you that are virtual campus family, our local community church in the Tampa Bay area at Metro Life Church with our physical campus. You all are family. And you hear me say it time and time again, but here on the day before Thanksgiving, I'm reminded of God's faithfulness and His favor and His mercy. When God is doing something, He puts people together to walk the journey together. We are not alone. The psalmist David was writing, he said, God takes individuals and puts them into families. We are a family, whether you're part of our local congregation or our online community. Thank you for everything you do to be connected to what God's doing here and to help us share the love of Jesus, the wisdom of God, and the prophetic word of the Lord. So I want to do something a little different today. I'm sure you're probably busy with a lot of festivities and preparation for tomorrow if you're still watching this on Wednesday. So I wanted to do something just a little different today. And two things. I want to read to you out of the words that King David wrote in 1 Chronicles 16 when David and Israel were in a time of great celebration. And here's what he says. 1 Chronicles 16 verse 7, on that day, David decreed for the first time that thanks be given to the Lord by Asaph and his relatives. They didn't have realtors back in ancient Israel. They were relatives, not realtors. So nevertheless, here's what David wrote. Give thanks to the Lord, call on his name, proclaim his deeds among the peoples. Sing to him, sing praise to him, tell him all about his wondrous works. Honor his holy name, and let the heart of those who seek the Lord rejoice, meaning be full of joy and sing about it, talk about it. Seek the Lord in his strength, seek his face at all times. Remember the wondrous works that the Lord has done, his wonders and his judgments that he has proclaimed, pronounced, and decreed. You who are the offspring of Israel, his servant, Jacob's descendants, his chosen ones. He is the Lord our God, and his judgments govern the whole earth. Remember his covenant forever. The promise he ordained to 1,000 generations, the covenant he made with Abraham, swore to Isaac, and confirmed to Jacob as a decree, and to Israel as a permanent covenant. I will give you the land of Canaan as your inheritance to possess it. Even when they were very few in number, very few indeed, and aliens or foreigners in Canaan, having wandered from nation to nation or from one kingdom to another. I want to stop there. Give thanks to the Lord, David wrote in another place, because he's good and his mercy endures forever. But in the passage that I just wrote, it has such profound meaning at all times, but I can't help but think about this Thanksgiving. With everything that's going on in our country, the Lord's still going to have his way. His prophetic word, his prophetic covenant, his prophetic promises are going to come to pass. They stand sure. I heard a very wise and seasoned prophet say recently that what God reveals to us in the light, we have to believe as fervently and faithfully when we're in the dark. So this has been a year of challenge and strain and darkness, but God is good. And that season we've been through in this year changes nothing. And so on this Thanksgiving Day, we are to worship the Lord for his covenant promises, his covenant faithfulness. And I don't know what your year has been like, but I pray that you will be in a place of gratitude and thanksgiving, giving thanks to God for his faithfulness to you. His faithfulness to our country. God's not done with America. God's not done with his church. He is faithful to keep covenant, David wrote in that passage I just read in 1 Chronicles 16. So we are to give thanks. We're to give thanks for the things he's done, and then we give him prophetic praise or prophetic thanksgiving for the things he said he's going to do that haven't come to pass yet, but if he said it, he'll do it. And the time that takes place in between the expression of a prophetic promise and the manifestation of it changes nothing. We are simply to give God prophetic praise. So yes, at this Thanksgiving season, we rejoice in all of the faithfulness and the mercy of God. And what we do is we thank him for the things he has done, and we prophetically thank him for the things we have promises and covenants with him that we know he's going to do. The highest praise, the most powerful, authoritative prayer and praise is when we praise and pray out of the prophetic word of the Lord that we have and the prophetic covenants that God has made with us. So before I go, I want to share something with you as it relates to where our national holiday of Thanksgiving came from. So that you may already know this, but the first Thanksgiving was instituted by religious, Christian, Jesus-loving, spiritual refugees. Much like Israel that David alluded to, they were few in number, but God brought them out of their wanderings into a land of promise, made covenant with them in that land. And that covenant still stands today, after all this time. God's covenant still stands with America. I couldn't help but think about the parallels and the connection between the early spiritual refugees that God brought out of Europe to flee religious persecution so they could worship Jesus according to truth, according to the faith that they had in their hearts, without fear of governmental tyranny and governmental retribution and oppression. In a time of darkness, spiritual refugees came to establish a covenant with God in this land. God heard it, and to this moment that I'm speaking to you right now, God remembers it and will not forget it, because he remembers our covenant promises, the ones that he has made. So on October 3rd of 1863, expressing gratitude for a pivotal Union Army victory at Gettysburg. By the way, that Union Army meant that in the fight, in the struggle to destroy and abolish forever out of the United States the abominable practice of slavery, when the South looked like they were going to win, and it looked like there was no way that the move of abolitionism and the abolishment of slavery would win in America, when it looked like darkness would prevail, God gave them a win at Gettysburg. God gave them a win, a pivotal breakthrough that turned the tide of the war, forever changed American history, and began to implement justice in America on behalf of those who've been brutalized in the black community because of the evil, vile practice of slavery. And so the turning of the tide to destroy slavery, to uproot slavery out of this nation, began at Gettysburg. A very powerful, symbolic victory. And it was because of that victory that President Abraham Lincoln announced that the nation, meaning the United States, will celebrate an official Thanksgiving holiday, giving thanks to God for their victory, on November 26th, 1863. Now, the speech was actually written by President Abraham's Secretary of State, William Seward, declaring that the fourth Thursday of every November thereafter would be considered an official U.S. holiday of Thanksgiving. This announcement harkened back to when President George Washington, in his first term as president in 1789, and the newly formed American nation had only just a few years previously emerged victorious from the American Revolutionary War. And at that time, President Washington called for an official celebratory, quote, day of public thanksgiving and prayer to God. And while Congress overwhelmingly agreed to President Washington's suggestion, the holiday had not yet become an actual event on a repetitive calendar until that pivotal victory. In a time when the outcome of America's destiny would be determined, would her people be free from the darkness and the wickedness of slavery? Or would darkness and wickedness win? Darkness and wickedness did not prevail then. The holiday we celebrate tomorrow, the fourth Thursday of every November, Thanksgiving, was a holiday instituted, first given voice to by President Washington to give prayer and thanksgiving to God for giving us freedom, delivering us from evil. And then President Lincoln in 1863 established it as a national holiday that has continued since because God gave us victory in the war on slavery. America's in a war right now. It's not a Democrat versus Republican, right versus left. It's good versus evil. It's darkness versus light. It's the covenant destiny that God has with us. It's freedom or tyranny. And God wins. And God's going to win this battle. And we have a covenant with him. And so today, as I come to you, I want to give thanks to God for you, as I said earlier, and to him for all that he's done. And all of the times in our history of our nation and on our own journeys, I could take time today to talk to you over and over and over about how oftentimes God would take me through a narrow pathway when he was leading me to a big door. And God's got a way of doing things, slipping in victories that nobody sees coming, and keeping his promise and fulfilling his covenant and moving us forward into the next phase of what he has purposed to do. He is the God, the creator, the Lord, the King, and the judge of all the earth. So I want to encourage you today, over the next 24 hours as you gather for your Thanksgiving celebration, take time to thank him historically for the things he has done and prophetically for the things that he has yet promised to do. For he who has promised is able also to perform it. And being confident, Paul says, in this very thing, we know that he who has begun a good work in you will complete it. God never stops the job without finishing it 100%. So give thanks to God for everything he's done, for his blessings, and that even though this has been a challenging year, God's faithful, and our best is yet to come. I pray for you. I pray for whatever season you're in individually. I pray for your family that at this Thanksgiving, that the joy of the Lord will indeed renew your heart and be your strength, and that you will have an overwhelming sense of the nearness of his presence, the certainty of his promise, the legitimacy of the prophetic covenants he has made with you, and the overwhelming confidence that he who began a good work in you, he who began a good work in this nation, our covenant-keeping, way-making, wonder-working God, put a word of rejoicing in your mouth, a song of victory in your heart, and words of release and declaration and decrees of joy and shouts of triumph on your lips. I love you. Thank you so much for being a part of the Metro Life Church family. And for me and my family, may you and yours have a very blessed and joy-filled Thanksgiving.